at least once, and some people get into it time. So, okay, so Deputy Harkin, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. I think you said that over 80% of those applying for asylum come across the border. Is that correct?
Yes, that's only in the last 3 years, but it has increased, yes.
Okay, so that means that the major issue is not with secondary movements, as you know, you're telling us that we're going to reduce them, but the major issue is not secondary movements from the EU. The significant issue are people coming across the border. Am I correct?
In some instances, but a lot of people have actually transited through the EU before they get to the UK. So under this new procedure, before they even get to the UK, they would be screened and they would then come up on a system. So the country would not necessarily be the UK as the first designated country. It could be another European country. So a lot of people transit, or a lot of people start in another EU country and go to the UK. And if we see movement then, but there will be some people who arrive in the UK as their first port of entry, and that's where the parallel agreement that we have with the UK is important and where that needs to kick in.
Because of the court judgment, obviously it's not working. But previous to the court judgment, what were the numbers like? What percentage did you manage to send back, or what was the situation?
I don't have those figures to hand, but it is absolutely the case that those numbers have increased significantly in recent months. So I'll have to get the figures for you. But
get it again. Yeah. My other question refers to the idea of sovereignty. I don't believe that what we're doing here is unconstitutional, because I canvassed twice for Lisbon and it was very clear that Lisbon gave us the opportunity to opt in or stay out if we wanted to. And indeed, I think one of the reasons people voted for Lisbon was that we had that opt-out. So that means if we're going to change that, we have to have a very good reason. So you're proposing we change that. So that means areas where we had sole decision-making power, where we now have, we will pool that decision-making, which does mean we are ceding sovereignty. It's not unconstitutional, it is constitutional, but we are now ceding sovereignty by pooling our decision-making, because that's what the overall EU treaties are about in the first place. And I think it's important to establish that fact and that we don't mix up the two things. What would your view be on that?
Well, I agree with your initial point. So it was made clear under the Lisbon Treaty that when it comes to security issues, when it comes to migration, that it is a European competence, but that we fought to ensure that we had the opt-in so that nothing would be forced upon us. So what we're talking about now is no different to any of the other measures that we've already opted into. It's an upgrading of many of the options that we're already a part of.
But by opting in, we are ceding sovereignty.
Well, we're choosing to opt in.
Yeah, we're choosing.
We're choosing to opt in.
Yeah, no, I just think that's an important point, and one that I'm not saying it's good or bad, but I'm just saying it is the situation. I suppose the next question I want to ask you is that you keep telling us that this is very positive for Ireland, that it will reduce secondary movements, and I'm happy to accept that. But what it won't reduce is it won't reduce asylum seekers or asylum beneficiaries. Those numbers probably will increase. So the overall burden on the EU will not be diminished. So just because it reduces secondary movement doesn't reduce in any way the obligations that we will have under the solidarity mechanism. And while I see 648 is the number, like there's no way that those numbers are going to remain there, because that's looking at 30,000 reallocations. I mean, those numbers are so small, I just can't believe it. Why did they come up with those numbers?
That's the number that was originally identified by the Commission.
But why? It doesn't bear any resemblance to the reality.
It's the minimum number, so absolutely it can increase. It would have to increase with the approval of all member states. Again, it is only the reallocation. It's not reflective of the overall figure. But I think the only way that this works is if we're also looking at the preventative side of things. So the pact is to respond to those who are already coming to Europe and seeking protection, but we need to make sure that we're looking at the root causes, and that work is ongoing and happening in parallel.
Yes.
So if more people are on the move, we need to address why are more people moving.
But that's not what we're talking about here.
No, we're not.
What we're talking about is numbers in a piece of legislation that in no way reflect the reality on the ground. I just don't understand that. And I've only 20 seconds, I will come back. One comment you made several times, that Ireland would be more attractive to asylum seekers if they didn't opt in. I find that hard to believe. Denmark, which has a much tougher asylum system than we have, decided not to opt in. If the Danes thought that by staying out it would make the country much more attractive, I suspect they'd have opted in. I don't expect you to comment on Danish policy, but I do think we shouldn't neglect that fact.
Just on Denmark, so Denmark doesn't have an option to opt in. When they agreed to join, similar in the same way that we negotiated that we would have the opt-in, they decided not to apply the asylum rules and regulations. They're part of Schengen though, so they're not opting out of any of the Schengen measures. So the measures we've discussed here, they're not opting out. What they have is a separate parallel process. But that's not what we looked for, and that's not what we agreed to, and that's not what people signed up to when they voted for the Lisbon Treaty. What they signed up to was us deciding whether we wanted to opt in or not. So we're not the same as Denmark.
So the
I don't think we can be compared to Denmark at all.
Why are they not more attractive? If not joining this makes us more attractive, why isn't Denmark?
Denmark has a very different system to us. Denmark has a system where people are detained. It's a very different system to us. It is a system where people are detained. They're not allowed leave. You know, you can look at what the reception conditions are like or not compared to ours, but they're very
EU
different.
Rules. They operate under EU rules.
They operate differently, so they have different. They have different agreements with different member states in terms of returns or takebacks. But it is a fact that they detain people. They detain people in the same way that you would in prison. It is the rules that they applied. That's the decision that they took. But that's not the decision that we have taken. It's not the route that we have chosen. And I don't think the vast majority of people would like us to go down that route. That is their decision. I'm not commenting on it, good, bad, or indifferent. But that is a very different system. They are part of Schengen, though, so they do apply all of the different Schengen rules. We can't. We're not part of Schengen for obvious reasons. But they are not operating in the same way. They have different
I understand
rules that they apply
but they
with
still
other member
operate
states.
within the EU treaties. That's just.
I'm going to move on to Senator Cogan.